My name is Sarah Mitchell, and for a long time I was ashamed even to pronounce those two words aloud. Because when someone asked, "Who are you?" I never had the courage to tell the truth. The truth is that I lived for years immersed in a kind of darkness that isn't learned overnight. I became an accomplice to kidnappings. I participated in operations that destroyed entire families. I observed the terror in people's eyes, and instead of retreating, I learned to use it as a tool. I moved as someone who no longer feels anything, as someone who no longer fears anything, as someone who believes that what they do will never be reached. I used to say that I was just part of the group, that I was only following orders, that I didn't directly hurt the victims. But every time I repeated those phrases, it was like putting another layer of ice on top of what was left of my conscience. And little by little, I stopped hearing the sound of my own heart. I stopped questioning my choices. I stopped realizing that I had crossed lines that one day I promised myself I would never cross. Easy money blinded me. The feeling of control made me arrogant. And the coldness I feigned began to be real. I became someone I wouldn't recognize myself if I went back in time and looked myself in the eyes. I knew I was wrong, but I kept going. Because deep down, I thought God wasn't watching. I thought that if I hid it well enough, nothing would come to light. But the truth always finds its owner. Always. And without realizing it, I was about to enter the most dangerous phase of my life. The one where darkness ceases to be a choice and begins to claim what is rightfully yours. I know this testimony has already moved you in these first few minutes, so stay with me. Subscribe and leave a like before we continue, because what comes next is something you need to hear until the end. Let's go together. I never planned to enter this world, but when you grow up surrounded by voices saying that no one will save you, you start to believe that the only way to survive is by hardening yourself before life crushes you. That's how it all started for me. An invitation disguised as an opportunity, a promise of quick money, a first simple mission, and suddenly, I was already in what would later destroy my soul. The feeling of power was addictive. It was as if every wrong decision gave me a distorted kind of strength, as if I were above the pain of others and beyond the reach of any spiritual consequence. I remember the first payout. It was more money than I'd ever held in my life. And for a moment, I felt an adrenaline rush that made me believe I'd finally found my place. It was a lie. But I would only realize that much later. With each kidnapping, I became more strategic. I learned escape routes, codes, signals, how to read the desperation on someone's face and turn that into an advantage. I was trained not to hesitate, and I didn't hesitate. My name began to circulate among people who saw in me someone efficient, cold, reliable for evil. And the higher I climbed in that dark hierarchy, the more I felt my humanity was being left behind. I thought that being afraid was weakness, that feeling was a waste of time, that compassion was a luxury for fools. The truth is, I was distancing myself from everything that could have saved me. And yet, I moved forward as if it were normal, as if living surrounded by suffering was just part of the job. I became a calculating person, someone who watched people cry and still only thought about the next step, the next paycheck, the next command. And if someone had asked me back then what I felt inside, I would have said nothing. Because that's exactly what it was. A deep, silent, growing nothingness. An emptiness that I filled with adrenaline, with money, with lies, with the illusion of control. And the more I fed that emptiness, the more it demanded of me. It was like an abyss calling my name every night, and I answered without realizing it. But there was a specific moment, an exact point in that trajectory when something changed, even if I didn't understand it at the time. It was a single, seemingly minor situation that opened the first crack in the armor I was wearing, and that fissure would be the beginning of a revelation I never imagined I would face. I still remember that day with a clarity that haunts me. It was supposed to be just another job. A simple instruction, no risk, no noise, just the way I liked it. We just needed to pick someone up, take them to an isolated location, and wait for the final order. I had done this before, many times. But that afternoon, something different happened. It wasn't to the victim, it was to me. When I held that girl by the arms, I felt something I hadn't felt with the previous ones, She didn't scream. She didn't beg. She just looked at me, a look that pierced through mine. It wasn't hatred. It wasn't horror. It wasn't despair. It was compassion. I still can't explain it. It was as if, for a second, she saw more than the criminal I had become. It was as if she saw who I could have been. And that look lasted only 3 seconds. But 3 seconds can open spiritual doors that entire years cannot close. I immediately looked away, trying to regain my composure, trying to convince myself that it meant nothing. But it did. And I felt it. Something inside me trembled, as if a very old, very ignored voice had awakened for an instant, and then fallen silent again. I remember taking a deep breath, trying to compose myself, trying to silence the discomfort. Because if there's one thing sin does, it's teach you to stifle everything that threatens to bring you back to the light. And I did exactly that. I pushed that feeling to the back of my throat and carried on as if nothing had happened. But I knew that that crack, that pang, that look, had stirred something I believed I had already killed inside me. That night, I didn't sleep. Well, something was haunting me. It wasn't guilt. It was a warning. A warning I ignored. I was about to discover that when you push your conscience away, it always finds a way to come back. And she returned, in a much crueler, much deeper way, and impossible to ignore. After that day, I realized that something inside me had changed, but instead of dealing with it, I did exactly what people like me always do. I hardened even more. I forced myself to believe that that feeling had been weakness, distraction, some kind of emotional slip that needed to be eliminated before it became a problem. In the world I lived in, feeling was dangerous. Overthinking was dangerous. And allowing the conscience to speak was practically a death sentence. So I chose the easiest path, or rather the quickest. I became even more indifferent. I began to treat each new kidnapping as a mathematical operation, a cold, faceless process, without a story, without a heart. I started to see the victims as objects, as steps, as parts of a machine that couldn't stop. And the less I felt, the more efficient I became. And the more efficient I was, the more valuable I was to that group. I turned my heart to stone because that's what evil demanded of me. And the more I allowed coldness to mold me, the easier it was to cross boundaries that once frightened me. At first, I trembled when I saw someone begging for their life. Then that turned into noise. Then silence. Then nothing. The complete absence of reaction. I entered houses as if entering an empty room. I tied people up as if closing a suitcase. I turned off crying as if flipping a switch. And this is where many people are mistaken. The worst part of evil isn't when you find pleasure in it. It's when you feel nothing at all. Indifference is more lethal than cruelty. Because while the cruel person still struggles with their conscience, the indifferent person has already given up on it. I knew I was becoming a silent monster, but it seemed too late to turn back. I told myself I had no choice, that I needed to move on, that the way back was already closed. And maybe it was. Because each step forward took me further away from who I had once been, and I no longer had the strength to look back. But life has a strange way of exposing what you try to hide even from yourself. And when awareness returns, it doesn't come as a whisper. It comes as a storm. And my storm began the night everything spiraled out of control, and I finally realized that darkness reclaims every inch you give it. That night had all the makings of being like any other. Cold, calculated, silent. I was so used to the rhythm of the darkness that I came to believe nothing could surprise me anymore. We get used to routine, even when it's made of shadows. I drove with the same calm as always, observing the street in the rearview mirror, noting every movement around me. Everything seemed too safe, too predictable. And perhaps that's what made me let my guard down. When I arrived at the agreed-upon meeting point, something inside me stirred. It wasn't fear. I hadn't felt fear in a long time. It was a different sensation, as if someone were watching me from a place beyond my sight. I ignored it. After all, that's what I lived for, ignoring what I couldn't explain. I got out of the car, walked to the narrow corner, and I remember feeling the wind cut through the silence. A strange silence. A silence that seemed to hold the air as if something was about to happen. And it happened. The sound of the gunshot didn't come from far away. It exploded so close that for a second, I thought it had happened inside my head. The impact shot through my chest like liquid fire, pushing my body backward. I tried to gasp for air, but none came. I tried to grab something, anything, but my hand slipped into the void. The cold ground approached too quickly, and when I touched the asphalt, everything seemed to slow down. Reality began to distort as if it were melting around me. I saw people approaching, but their faces blurred together. The voices reached me like wet whispers, distant, unrecognizable. And as I tried to understand what was happening, a profound feeling took hold of my body. Not pain, but a certainty. The certainty that this wasn't just a gunshot. It was a calling. It was the moment I had tried to postpone for years. My breathing became heavy, short, weak. And as my eyes began to close, the only thing I could think was, it can't be now. I'm not ready. But death never waits for you to be ready. It just arrives. And when my eyes finally closed, I discovered that death is not silence. It is revelation. It is the beginning of something none of us are prepared to see. When my eyes finally closed, I imagined it would all end there. Darkness, silence, nothing. But that's not what happened. In fact, it was the opposite. It was as if someone had lifted an enormous weight from my shoulders, and for a second, I felt lightness. A lightness so strange that it startled me even before I understood what was happening. I tried to breathe, but realized I didn't need to anymore. My body was motionless on the ground, but I was standing. The first thing I saw was my own hand lying beside the pool of blood that was slowly spreading. I blinked, confused, thinking I was hallucinating. But it wasn't delirium. My vision was clearer than it had ever been. The colors around me seemed different, more intense, and at the same time more distant. I tried to touch my own shoulder, to try to wake myself from that absurd scene. But when I reached out, my fingers passed through my body as if it were made of smoke. That was the moment terror gripped me. A deep, silent terror that didn't come from my body, because my body no longer felt anything, but from my soul. I heard screams all around me, people running, someone calling for help, hurried footsteps. And yet, everything sounded as if it were behind a thick wall, muffled, distant. I tried to speak, but no words came out. I tried to move quickly, but it was like floating in a space that no longer obeyed the rules I knew. Then, the scenery began to change. The street lost its shape. The lights seemed to lengthen and shrink, like distorted reflections in the water. It was as if the world was being pulled away from me. And I began to feel a presence. A presence so strong that my spirit seemed to tremble. I didn't know who it was, but I knew I wasn't alone. I knew that something, or someone, had found me. And at that moment, for the first time since childhood, I felt like I had nowhere to run. And when I finally raised my eyes, I realized that the presence before me was not unfamiliar. It was the one I had denied my whole life, the one I never wanted to face. When that presence revealed itself before me, everything around me simply stopped. There was no more street, no more sirens, no more body lying on the ground. It was as if the world had been silenced so that I could face only one reality. He was there, and there was no way to escape. There was no way to deny it. There was no way to hide it. I always imagined that if I ever saw Jesus, I would feel peace. But it wasn't peace that struck me first. It was truth. A truth so absolute, so profound, and so undeniable that it pierced me like an invisible blade. He didn't speak my name. He didn't accuse me. He simply looked at me. And his gaze was like a mirror that doesn't distort anything, that doesn't soften anything, that doesn't forgive lies. It only reveals. I felt shame, like I had never felt in my life. Shame that didn't come from fear of punishment, but from clarity, from the certainty that he was always there. He always saw every decision I made, every victim I delivered, every night I chose darkness even knowing there was another way. And in that gaze, I didn't see hatred. I saw justice. A justice so pure that it made my spirit tremble. And it was there, before him, that I understood something. I never imagined I would understand. I didn't need anyone to condemn me. I was already condemned myself. Because when you stand before the true light, there is no room for masks, excuses, justifications, or narratives. There is only who you truly are. And I was no good at all. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't make a gesture of disapproval. But when Jesus opened his palm, something began to move around me, as if memories were taking shape, as if every moment I tried to bury was resurfacing, not as images, but as weight. A weight that pressed against my chest even though I no longer had a body. A weight that screamed everything I had tried to forget. I wanted to look away. I wanted to run. I wanted to disappear. But before him, there is no escape. There is no shadow strong enough to hide who you have become. And yet, I didn't feel that he hated me. I felt that he was inviting me to see what I was afraid to admit, to finally understand what my choices meant in the spiritual world. And when he took a step toward me, I knew. The revelation had not yet begun. What I would see next would change everything forever. And then, without any warning, Jesus reached out his hand. And what he showed me was far worse than any physical pain I've ever felt in my life. When Jesus extended his hand, I felt as if the air around me was ripped from its place. It wasn't violence, it wasn't fury, it was revelation. A revelation that didn't come to destroy, but to expose. And in that instant, the atmosphere changed again. The light that had previously surrounded me began to recede, as if making room for something I never imagined I would be able to see, much less feel. I wasn't taken to a physical place. There were no walls, no floor, no sky. There was sensation. And that sensation took shape as if the spiritual world itself were translating for me what I refused to see in life. It was then that I felt fear. Not natural fear, not the terror that paralyzes, not the panic that makes the body tremble. It was a different kind of fear. A pure fear. A fear that didn't come from outside, but from within. It was as if every accelerated heartbeat that a victim felt because of me had been stitched into my own soul. I heard cries, short breaths, whispers of despair, voices pleading for help. But what destroyed me most were the sensations. I felt the anguish of someone torn from their home. I felt the despair of someone who believed they were going to die. I felt the darkness that envelops a person when they realize they are completely defenseless. I felt the panic I caused without hesitation. I felt as if I were inside every moment of terror I provoked, as if they were my own, as if I were the victim of myself. And Jesus let me feel everything, not with cruelty, not with pleasure, but with truth, with justice. He didn't need to say, "Look what you've done." He simply allowed me to experience the reality I had ignored, the reality I thought had no spiritual weight, the reality I believed was too distant to reach. The revelation was clear. No one goes through the pain they cause without facing the spiritual harvest of what they have sown, not because God desires punishment, but because he cannot deny what is just. I started screaming inside. There was no voice, no air, but there was a cry of someone who finally understood that hell isn't just fire. It's awareness. It's lucidity. It's feeling what you produced in the world, coming back to you, multiplied. And in the midst of that despair, something changed. The revelation wasn't over, but it was about to transform into something even deeper. Because it was there, at the height of my own truth, that Jesus did something I never expected. He offered me something I didn't deserve. At the very moment I thought there was no turning back, when my soul seemed to sink into what I myself had sown, the presence of Jesus changed. Not his majesty, not his authority, that remained unchanged. But something in his gaze softened the darkness around me. It wasn't permissiveness, it was mercy. A mercy so intense that it wounded me more than any accusation ever could. I couldn't speak, but he heard my despair even before I tried to express it. And faced with all that weight I felt, as if I were simultaneously experiencing every pain I had caused, I did something I never imagined I had the courage to do. I broke down. I crumbled inside. I didn't ask for life. I didn't ask for protection. I didn't ask to escape. I asked for forgiveness. The forgiveness I never offered anyone. The forgiveness I didn't think I deserved. The forgiveness I didn't even believe existed for someone like me. And it was in that silent cry that Jesus reached out his hand again. Not to show me more pain, but to pull me back. The sensation was like breathing after being held underwater for a long time. Everything lit up so intensely that I felt as if my soul would dissolve in that light. But instead, I awoke. I woke up in the hospital, with tubes, machines, hurried voices, and a pain in my chest that reminded me exactly where my life had been ripped away. I was alive. I didn't know why, but I was. And the first thing I did was cry. Not a cry of despair, a cry of understanding. I hadn't come back because I deserved it. I had come back because God still had something to deal with me, something I needed to make amends. The following days were the hardest. Every face I remembered, every family I destroyed, every name I tried to forget haunted me like an echo. And I understood that regret isn't a feeling, it's a path. So I started walking. I sought out people. I asked for forgiveness. I gave away information. I exposed myself. I humbled myself. I rebuilt myself from pieces. And with each step, I felt that the light that restored me continued to guide me. But before all of that, there was a moment. A final instant in his presence that marked my return. Because Jesus not only gave me back my life, he gave me a warning, one that wasn't just for me. It was for everyone who would one day hear my story. When Jesus gave me back my own life, the feeling that coursed through my spirit wasn't that of someone receiving something broken and worthless, but rather that of someone who, even carrying a history full of flaws, is placed before a new beginning that demands responsibility, awareness, and courage. This is because, before my eyes opened in the hospital, and even before I felt the weight of air returning to my lungs, still in that mysterious space between the ultimate limit of eternity and the first breath of life, he communicated something that surpassed any form of language I had ever experienced, a message that needed no sound, voice, or expression, for it was transmitted so profoundly that only the human spirit is capable of truly understanding it. And this message, though simple, carried a depth that destabilized everything I believed I knew about myself. No one can deceive what I see. This statement, which came without any hint of irritation, impatience, or any form of impulsive condemnation, carried a weight that didn't oppress, but rather revealed, as if the truth that had always existed, and which I had spent years trying to avoid, had finally reached the most hidden part of my soul. There was no shadow to hide in, no justification that could sustain the distorted version of myself that I had learned to present to the world, and no mask that could, survive the clarity of that gaze that exposed not only what I had done, but also what I had become while repeating choices that distanced me from what could one day have been redemption. From that moment on, I began to understand that life is not defined solely by visible actions, but also by the intentions we silently cultivate, the thoughts we unconsciously nurture, the limits we push further and further away, and the shadows we tolerate within ourselves while insisting on believing that none of this will have a price we need to pay. Every choice I made, every step I took in the opposite direction of truth, every situation in which I normalized evil or accepted emotional and spiritual corruption as if it were merely part of the human journey. All of this formed a path that one day would need to be retraced, and that day had finally arrived. And the most impactful thing is that nothing I had done was forgotten in eternity. Every detail was before him, not with the aim of destroying me, but with the intention of confronting me with what I refused to see while I still had time to change. And that's precisely why I need to give this warning to you who are listening to me now. Don't be fooled into believing that death is the moment when everything becomes clear, because the truth is that revelation happens while we are still breathing, and the sooner we face who we are, the more opportunities we have to allow God to transform what is deteriorated inside. Don't wait until the last moment to recognize who you really are. Don't wait to cross the border between this world and eternity to finally understand what you have been planting over the years. And don't live believing that God isn't observing what you hide even from yourself. He has always seen. He has always known. And yet he continues to offer mercy to all who wish to abandon the darkness while there is still life, time, and chance. If this story has stirred something within you, be it fear, deep reflection, sincere regret, or simply the awareness that something needs to change before it's too late, don't ignore this moment, because it may have been placed before you precisely to prevent you from following a path of no return. Comment now, "I choose the truth," not as an empty ritual, but as a gesture of awareness and decision. And if you want to continue following testimonies that confront, awaken, and transform, subscribe to the channel right now, because none of this reached you by chance. And the darkness that once dominated me doesn't have to dominate your story. God is calling, and while life goes on, you can still choose to listen.